My name is Courtney Colson, a female to male to female detransitioner, and on this channel we try to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. On this episode, traveling to Japan to defeat the phantom pain. That's right, I'm back. It's been a while since I've done a full-length video. I have never traveled before, not in any way that really counted until this year. My parents would take us an hour or two south of Perth to Margaret River or Murray Lakes, and that was it. We travelled to Sydney and Queensland once as a family. We went there to see U2, and that's one of the few happy memories of my childhood. My parents always promised these amazing international trips: Hawaii, Europe, America. According to those that knew him, my father was always overpromising and under-delivering, and they weren't wrong. He would spend money before we had it. Deals often fell through. My parents were terrible financially. I'm amazed we survived as long as we did. Then, once for a couple of weeks, we went to Hong Kong and China. I think I was around 16 years old. I have no idea why my parents decided to go there. I would suddenly realize that my parents are really racist, incredibly racist. My father in particular referred to the Chinese as ants. We mostly stuck to all the Western touristy spots, so my concept of travel was being cramped into a metal fart tube in the sky for half a day to end up in a place that feels identical to home, but worse. We did not engage in Chinese culture at all. We did not experience China's rich history and identity. It's no wonder then that travel didn't speak to me. But as I've gotten older and distanced myself from my parents, I realize how small and shallow they are, and the world is so much bigger than they had led me to believe. But even in my adult life, I still had no interest in travel really, but I wanted to meet one of my online friends, and he lives on the complete other side of the world, but he said he wanted to go to Japan, and that appealed to me. We could meet at a halfway point between our countries, plus it's a culture and a language I am already familiar with. I have been studying Japanese for the past 5 years or so, quite intensely. Most of the media I consume comes from Japan. It's, there's Metal Gear Solid over here. We've got Berserk. So that's why I learned Japanese. It's a language I regularly make a lot of use of. So I saved up the money to go to Japan pretty quickly, surprisingly. But my friend could never get his act together. We had a bit of a falling out, and I was tired of how wishy-washy he was, so out of spite I said, fuck it, I'm going to Japan by myself. And you know what, spite is a great motivator. I realized there are so many things I held myself back from because I was waiting for other people to accompany me or help me. But if there's anything I've learned in this life, and we'll come back to this a few times, no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to help you, unless you pay for it. I am fundamentally alone, and I should stop waiting for other people. I'm holding myself back. And that being said, my friend and I, we have reunited, and our relationship is better than ever. He's probably watching this. Now we're finally being honest with each other. Our communication is fantastic, so, haven't lost a friend over this. Having never traveled before, especially not solo, I was nervous. I was clueless and relying on this friend to help. And we've already talked about this. He knows this. He knows. He was useless. You made it seem way more complicated and overwhelming than it really was. And he never mentioned going to a travel agent. He never mentioned going on a tour. So there I was, hitting the books hard, doing all this research. I'm already studying Japanese. But then learning how to navigate booking flights and accommodation and figuring out where I want to go and what I want to do and what I want to see. And I imagined I'd be so overwhelmed I'd just stick to my hotel room the entire time. Ironically, my mother was a travel agent before I was born. So you'd think that the first thing that would go into my head, I'm going to travel, I need a travel agent. But I just didn't. She even helped organize one of my brother's trips to Europe. So I honestly have no idea why it didn't occur to me just to talk to a travel agent until one day I was in a shopping center and I saw one and I just thought to ask. And it turns out it's really easy. My agent, Max, I'll shout him out, he was great, Max, suggested a tour, and that seemed like the best way to see the country. Someone else had done all the work for me, I'll be traveling with a group, we'll be hitting way more places than I would have on my own. Okay, so the tour starts in Tokyo, then Takayama, Kyoto, Hiroshima, and finally Osaka. And it wasn't just spite that inspired me to travel. I felt that I needed it on a deeper level. Travel is a kind of rite of passage, a ritual we're largely missing in the modern world. But beyond that, this trip was about mastery of the self. I've been in therapy for years since I was hit by that car, psychotherapy, physiotherapy, pain specialist, neurologist, you name it. But no one could help me. I've been dealing with what we call phantom pain since the incident. All of my physical injuries have healed, and yet I am in constant pain, and I'm always tired. Phantom pain, not to be confused with phantom limb syndrome, although they are related. Phantom pain, also known as chronic pain, central sensitization syndrome, psychogenic pain, and a few other names. Fibromyalgia is related and better known, but it isn't caused by an injury, which is the sort of defining difference. Fibromyalgia doesn't have a clear cause, where my pain does. So this is all very complicated, and the medical community doesn't really have a consensus on what these experiences are, what to call them. They keep changing the name. I can't remember what it is, but they're proposing another name. But I choose to call it the Phantom Pain because of Metal Gear Solid, of course, and it sounds badass, obviously. I've had to do so much reading on pain, and I would recommend Why Does It Still Hurt? And The Body Keeps the Score. There's essentially two kinds of pain, neuropathic and nociceptive. Your body reacts to painful stimulus using nociceptors, pain receptor nerves. Neuropathic pain is when the nervous system has been damaged due to illness, trauma, injury, and so essentially hallucinates pain. Constant pain. My therapists were all telling me to rest, listen to my body, take it easy, but everything I read told me this was all in my head, and I just needed to pull my head out of my ass. And I'm discovering from my own experiences and the experiences of others that therapists tend to coddle patients. Maybe this is controversial to say, but they promote a sense of disempowerment. I realized I just needed someone to kick my ass into gear again. And so the first thing I thought of course, was that I should join the army, and I do want to join the army, but they won't let me in because of my injuries and food intolerances, although I might try to reapply again next year. Okay, so what else could I do? Well, I joined a gym, and I go to this weekly body pump class, 1 hour of intense, constant movement. And I struggled at first, but it taught me that I could do it. I wasn't in danger, I could push myself further than I imagined, and I was surrounded by a community of mostly women. I felt safe, and if I was pushing myself too hard, my instructor would notice. And my instructor has called me out on my technique a few times, so she's making sure I am safe. I also decided to take up singing as therapy. My mother bullied me out of singing as a child because I wasn't as good as my cousins. Well, they were rich and went to theatre school, so of course, one of my cousins got to play Annie in a major musical with Bert Newton. I'm sorry, Mum, I'm not naturally good at singing, but then neither are my cousins. Singing is known to be very therapeutic and a way of connecting mind with body. I've honestly found it really helpful. I look forward to it every week, and I apply myself to it every day. I'm finally getting real control over my voice. In my first lesson, I had no range at all. I could barely project my voice. In fact, it was quieter than my speaking volume. The most useful thing I got out of my therapists and all those books is that essentially what is happening is that my internal alarm system is extremely overreactive. At first, it was responding to real pain, real trauma, real danger. And Bessel van der Kolk in the Body Keeps the Score book talks about how following a traumatic accident, the patients with a loving, caring, safe environment recover much faster than those who don't. Sadly, I'm in the latter category, much like Guts in the manga Berserk. I went through the worst physical and mental traumas of my life, and then I was just expected to get up and keep fighting alone or die. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that in 2022 alone, I was hit by 2 cars, my house was burgled twice, Ivy, my car, my love of my life, was stolen, but thankfully she was recovered. I was abused by my family, the house I was renting was sold, so I was evicted during a housing crisis and I had nowhere to go. And I'm still living with a friend, fortunately, but I'm an hour away from work, so I have very little free time. Last year, I briefly moved into a share house closer to work, and that was great, 10 minutes to work. Then it turned out the landlord was a drug dealer and a human trafficker, and he abused me because, I'm strong and independent and not susceptible to being controlled like that. So then I fled and returned to my friend. I even had doctors abuse me as well. I just keep getting fucked over. My trust in people is at an absolute rock bottom. And I'm sorry to skim over all these dramatic backstory bits and pieces there, but look, we don't have time for that, and that's what this channel's for. Go watch the other videos. I've had some smart-ass commenters tell me that I'm exaggerating, I'm lying, I have a victim mentality, and I really don't. I think I tend to downplay my problems or assume the treatment I've gone through in life is normal. Until I talk to other people, I talk to friends and they go, holy fuck, they did what to you? No, that's not normal. That's not okay. Oh, alright. Or they'll say that I'm a bit of a main character because I'll just casually drop in all this tragic backstory and all this dramatic lore as if it's nothing. My body might have healed. My mind might downplay and disregard the trauma as simply normal parts of life. But the body keeps the score. Over the years following the incident, I've suffered from insomnia, psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, fainting, spasms, paralysis, and constant unending pain. The pain is akin to that feeling you get after an intense workout, to the point that I struggle to tell the difference. But sometimes, like right as I first lie down to go to sleep, it comes over me like a wave, is really intense pain, sometimes has me balled up in the fetal position, and sometimes with added nausea too, just to mix things up, just for a little bit of extra fun. So, the gym and singing were really helping, but they didn't cure me. I was still missing a lot of days of work, I was still suffering. And that's where travel comes into it. For me, traveling wasn't about fun. It was a quest, a trial, a test of endurance. Before I left, people were asking me if I was excited or what I looked forward to seeing most in Japan. But I wasn't excited. I was dreading it. I was eager to get it over and done with. But I couldn't tell people that, I'm going to see what my mind and body are capable of. I expect this will be one of the most intense tests of endurance of my life. You become a little intense after you nearly die. The first challenge was flying out at midnight. And I was dreading that. I normally wake up at 5 a.m. for work, and I'm in bed by about 8:30, 9:30 at night. So I worried I couldn't even handle that deviation. But in hindsight, I don't know why I felt that way. After being hit by the car, I would have many sleepless nights. I wouldn't sleep at all. I had crippling insomnia, as I said, but I survived. I recovered. Flying out that late was actually a good thing. I slept through most of the trip. I was even lucky enough to have the entire middle row entirely to myself. I could lie down, I slept. It was 8 hours from Perth to Hong Kong, and then I think it's another 6 hours to Japan. So it's an entire day of flying, essentially. When I landed in Japan, I was using my Japanese language immediately. The flight was rough, the turbulence was bad, I was so nauseous and dehydrated. They didn't give us water bottles on that flight. They did the one from Perth to Hong Kong, but on the Japanese one, no. Just little cups of water. And I had no water to take tablets for the nausea. And I can endure any kind of pain. But nausea wrecks me. I am a coward. And as is typical for all flights, we'll push through customs like cattle. And I'm like, Misu kudasai. I was asking for water, and they did not give a shit and made me fill out these forms. And I was so ill. I had a bit of a flop sweat going. I thought I was going to throw up or faint or both. Could barely focus on the forms. But I did it, I pushed through, I got through customs, and then it's a long walk to find any source of water. I mean, the people who worked at the damn airport didn't know there was a drinking fountain not too far from them. What the fuck? And on top of that, I had no phone reception. When I landed in Hong Kong, my Optus Global Roaming mobile network kicked in automatically. But then when I got to Tokyo Airport, I got nothing. So I walked outside of the airport to see if it was just the building that was preventing the signal. Nope, no change. So I was sitting there in the airport using their Wi-Fi, messaging Optus, trying to get my mobile data to work. We were trying everything, and then after about an hour, they got it working. So I could figure out which train I needed to get to, where I needed to go to get to the hostel. So I arrived at the hostel just as the tour guide, Yaz, is about to start the meeting. Perfect timing for me. And he also gave me this little origami kangaroo. I don't know if I cover the face. Which is green and gold, Australian colours. Although apparently the colour was a complete coincidence. Initially the group was just a bunch of men, most of them much older than me, so yeah, I felt a little out of place. But there were a few women and younger guys who joined a bit later. I made friends with Chloe first, who sat next to me, a British woman about my age. She's cute. Yeah, we had fun. I was exhausted and I was starving, and even though it was so late at night for me, I went out to dinner with the group. I had this offal soup, which was terrible. It was awful. And it's not because it was awful, because I eat that all the time, and I was looking forward to livers and kidneys and hearts, the good stuff. But what I got was a massive bowl of broth with these tiny bits of rubber chicken neck, like not even that many. It was inedible. And then I'd ask the waitress, could I order something else? And she kept telling me, later, later, later. Then my mate Klaus, he asks for something, and she gives it to him right away. And I just thought, fuck this, I need food, and I'm not getting it here. And as you know, I normally eat one meal a day. I'm very good at fasting. And I got a little bit of food on the plane, but that's all I'd had. So I wandered back to the hostel alone, searching for convenience stores along the way, feeling absolutely overwhelmed and awful. But I had the boss's voice in my head. Metal Gear's the boss was in my head, and she was saying, "What, are you going to cry about this like a little baby? This is what you signed up for. What did you expect? You're going to quit already? Well, too bad, you can't." But you know what? I pushed through. I got myself a packet of eggs, a carton of milk, and some yogurt. And when I got back to the hostel, I sculled that milk like I was a relapsing alcoholic. I made some scrambled eggs in the microwave, and I finally felt full. And I thought eating right before bed would make sleep difficult, but it wasn't. And so Japan's an hour ahead of Perth, so it wasn't a huge difference in terms of time zone. After eating, I had my first cold shower in the Japanese winter. It was intense, but the best experience I'd had that entire day. A kind of self-inflicted pain to ease the other pain. And, as I mentioned, I do have a bit of history with self-harm, and it's because it's this way of gaining a sense of relief and control. The next day, I went to Asakusa, wandering around the city. I sent a message to my Japanese teacher, and she was very proud to see me there. Wandered around the city, went to a temple, got to know the group much better, and they're a good bunch. The sheer amount of people there in that city, well, actually all cities in Japan, it's overwhelming. I don't know how people live like that all the time. Almost immediately, I was missing the quiet, open spaces of Australia. And then after all of our group activities, I went off to the Pokemon store by myself. And Chloe said that she was impressed that I was getting around by myself on day one. And I actually hadn't thought anything of it. About a year before going on this trip, I was terrified to be alone. Being a woman and with my injuries in a foreign land, I mean, God, anything could go wrong. Food was the main challenge the entire trip. It was just a struggle to get enough calories. Everyone else was able to grab junk food at whatever train stations we stopped at, but there was never anything I could eat. On day 2, we went to a traditional village in Takayama, and I saw snow for the first time. It's really strange stuff. I had no idea what the texture was going to feel like. I had to learn how to walk in it. I had no frame of reference. But I couldn't really appreciate the snow when we first got there. As soon as we left the train station, I was shoving snow into my mouth because I had run out of water and I hadn't eaten in 24 hours and we hadn't been near a bathroom room where I could fill up my water bottle. And by the way, it was freshly fallen pure white snow. I have read the SAS Survival Handbook cover to cover. Just so you know, I was prepared for this survival trip. We took a bus to the mountains and wandered around this lake. But I was just so fixated on finding food and water, I didn't really get to enjoy the place. But that was okay. I was imagining myself as a soldier and I was treating this as a mission. I had to procure resources on site. I quickly learned that you can't put snow in a water bottle and try to melt it with your body temperature. I mean, it's a silicone bottle, so I was kind of crushing it and it just turned into harder ice. I eventually found a public toilet and filled my water bottle in the sink. But food was nowhere to be found, though. The only meal we ever stopped for was dinner, which I never eat. I honestly don't know how people eat that late at night. Eating one meal a day. I eat that around the middle of the day. And every now and then I might still be hungry and then I'll eat again around 6 p.m. at the latest. But the group was going out and eating 7 or 8 at night when I'd be winding it down to go to sleep. And that's a major reason I don't think I ever fully bonded with the group. They would go out for dinner and then wander the town, drinking until the early hours of the morning, and then somehow wake up at 7 a.m. and do it all again. I felt like an outsider, and I've been realizing that mine is a path that not many travel. The discipline I have is not common. The values I have are not common. And the rest of the group was looking for a party on this trip, and I was on a mission. And so I started each day bright and early around 6 a.m. with stretches and exercise before everyone was even dragging themselves slowly out of bed. That afternoon on the second day in Takayama, on our way to the hotel, we came across a traditional little grocery store. Only thing that looked edible was this eel jerky, and I was so hungry I ripped into this stuff only to want to spit it out again. It was loaded with sugar. It tasted like lollies. How would anyone? It's absolutely disgusting. Why would you want sugary meat? I've heard of sweet meat, but that's not what this means. Everyone was telling me before I got there, Japan has great food, it's healthier food, everything's so cheap. I mean, maybe compared to America, but no, it was more expensive and worse quality than Australian food. And the irony is, they were serving us Australian meat. As far as I could tell, all their Wagyu beef came from Australia. From farms probably owned by foreign investors, Japanese investors. But later that day, the tour guide, took us to a 7-Eleven. And that's when I loaded up on supplies. I got sausages, I bought a heap of dairy, a worrying amount of dairy. They individually wrapped cheese balls. What the fuck? So there was no fridge in our very traditional hotel, but I could store food in the snow outside. They also had an onsen indoor hot tub thing. And I really wanted to give a public onsen a go. Before I traveled to Japan, I wanted to visit one, but I don't know, just never went around on our trip. I think I might have been the only one who actually used that onsen because everyone else went out for dinner again, and I stayed home and watched the snow and Johnny Mnemonic on my phone.
It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
And that's the other thing too. I was sleeping really well every single night, despite rarely sleeping in the same bed twice. And there's all the unfamiliar sounds and voices. And my stomach was doing amazingly well. I was eating whatever I could get my hands on, which wasn't strictly carnivore. There's probably another, heap of spices and preservatives and who knows what. But I was fine. And so now I wonder, maybe I'm just not exerting myself enough. I would sleep better, my stomach would be better if I was much more active. In Kyoto the next day, we wandered around Fushimi Inari Taisha Shinto Shrine. It was a beautiful place. I was just so glad to be outdoors, amongst nature, a little bit away from the people. Later, we went to the city, and again, I went exploring alone. Everyone else paired off, but no one wanted to accompany me, but that didn't really bother me. As you might know, I've struggled a lot with loneliness, and I think that's because I grew up with the same expectations that every human being has. Your family will be with you and love you unconditionally for the rest of your life. That's a lie. There's someone for everyone. Eventually you will have someone at your side. That is also a lie. But lately I've been seeing myself as sort of like Samurai Jack, a guy who wanders an alien world alone, making casual friends easily, no matter where he goes. But ultimately, he is alone. But he's okay with that. And I'm learning to be okay with that too. Removing those old expectations helped a lot. It doesn't completely stop my nervous system craving comfort and touch, but it's manageable. That's just not the path I'm destined for, I guess. While on my own, I got myself a steak. I really desperately needed that. But I needed about 3 more plates of food to actually feel satisfied. I mean, that's normally what I eat in one sitting. And I couldn't afford that many steaks. I wish I knew what it was like to leave a restaurant feeling full. It's always a pathetic little snack for me. And, I need a buffet. But there wasn't one nearby that day, so I went to a Wendy's and got myself some burgers. And this would be about half my diet while I was in Japan. Thus began my routine. I would have my first plate of food in a nicer restaurant, have a steak usually, and that's around midday. Then I would go to a fast food joint, get myself a couple of burgers. I'd eat everything except for the bread, of course. Amazingly, I could eat chips, and it didn't make me sick. Then I would go to the 7-Eleven and buy a heap of dairy products, a worrying amount of dairy products, and I'd eat it all in one sitting. I was eating ice cream and yogurt and cheese and all of that just to hit 2,000 calories a day. And despite eating fast food every single day and way more calories than I ever have in recent memory, I came home and I was still 60 kilos, but I had lost fat and gained muscle. And when I returned home, everyone was saying, "Oh, I look so healthy, my skin is glowing." And yeah, maybe part of that was just the constant walking, but I think the other half is just losing my resting trauma face. Yeah, and I smile a lot, but when I'm not actively engaging with someone, I think I must have looked pretty miserable and tired. That inner turmoil crawling in my skin. And you see that a lot with depressed and traumatized people, that they can be the life of the party, they can have a great sense of humor, Robin Williams, but underneath that, there's a lot of pain you can see sometimes, especially when they think no one is watching, the resting trauma face. But now, apparently, I look a lot happier. And I feel a lot happier too. I feel reborn. I feel cured. So for the rest of that day, I wandered the shops, went to a samurai museum. I have a bit of a samurai obsession, so I definitely could feed that fixation in Japan. After that, I went to a Shiba Inu cafe, and that was fun. It was nice to just get the comfort of animals and just to sit still, drink a coffee, cuddle some cute dogs. I don't have to rush to be anywhere. The next day was a day off, and I spent that morning, while everyone else was sleeping, I was lying in bed looking at Google Maps, trying to figure out what I could go see within walking distance. What kind of interesting, unusual things were showing up on that map? not even necessarily tourist attractions. So after doing a little bit of planning, telling Yaz where I was off to, I went on my little quest. I spent that morning meditating at a temple, which is what I really wanted to do. I had a few friends telling me before I left, send lots of photos, and initially I was hesitant to do that. I just wanted to be in the moment. Yes, I was documenting a lot as I went, as you can tell from the footage I'm sharing, but I was sharing very little of that with my friends in the moment because I wanted to be in the moment. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'll only just share one photo. I'll have my one moment. I didn't want to do the typical thing that people do on social media, that they're spamming all their travel photos and no one cares. But that day, I had my moment. I was sitting in the sun, meditating, staring at the water dripping out of this pipe thing. I was totally present. Wasn't in any pain or feeling a lack of anything. I was watching these Shinto students wandering past me. A few teachers gave me a little nod as they saw me meditating. I don't know what that was about. After that, I wandered the gardens and watched the koi fish. And this was the kind of tranquility I was looking for. I was searching for healing on this trip. I wasn't looking for a party. After that, I went to a used bookstore, and using my limited Japanese, I managed to ask for help to get this copy of Spriggan original edition, first edition, 90s, and this Kamoiden, which I had never actually heard of before, but I really love the artwork, and something about, this is volume 4, this isn't even the first, they had the first one there, but I don't know, there's something about this one, there was the first one I picked up, I really love the artwork, so, if I want to, I can just track down the rest, but yeah, might have a go, because it's all in Japanese, so I'll have a go at translating all those myself. And I mean, I always love Spriggan. I think the Netflix version was the first one I saw. And yeah, it's a little bit Metal Gear Solid. It's a little bit Generator Rex, if anyone remembers that cartoon. So I've always had a soft spot for it. The next day we went to Hiroshima and visited the memorial and the Peace Museum, and it was confronting, as you would expect. And I do a Metal Gear Solid podcast, Metal Gear Solid, so I am no stranger to discussions and depictions of nuclear war. But I've always found nuclear war and the effects of radiation, like Chernobyl, to be one of the most tragic things a human being could experience. It's like some kind of curse inflicted upon you by an unseen evil force. You are touched once and doomed forever to unimaginable suffering. Towards the end of the museum, I'd had enough. I felt dizzy and overwhelmed, and I just wanted to get out of there. But then my eyes landed on these big posters. I've only taken little photos as I could sort of sneak, because you're not supposed to take photos in the museum, but I really needed to get this text. I really needed to remember this. And I don't really know exactly what made me stop to read them. The title was something like The Story of N and a Family Falling Apart. I don't know why that made me stop, but what I read was a story I could relate to. Even when you survive something like an atomic bomb or a hit and run that everyone saw and remembers, eventually the fuckers tell you your pain is imaginary. People do not understand this kind of pain until they live it. In Japan, they were calling it the idler's disease, much like the American yuppie disease. People don't understand pain, no matter where they're from. It's frustrating to realize that for decades, even centuries, humans have suffered from this phantom pain, this post-traumatic illness, and we don't understand a fucking thing about it. And the people suffering with it are either blamed or given false hope by cluelessly optimistic doctors. Nothing has changed since the 1940s, or even further back. Now, of course, N's pain came from the effects of radiation. There were probably many things wrong with him on a structural level that would be visible with modern medical imaging and tests. But back then, everyone just shrugs and tells him to get over it. But am I so different, or anyone else with invisible pain? The source of our pain may one day be a very simple thing to detect and diagnose. But as of right now, we are faced with the same empty promises and dead ends for a relief or a cure. And then when all those treatments fail, in come the accusations of being weak and that the pain is all in our heads. We're just hypochondriacs. So poor N was diagnosed as a mental patient. But this guy, he sounds like a tough son of a bitch. He pushed through. He was never the same again, but he endured that pain for another 20 years, although he could support his family, and that must have been humiliating. He endured that pain until 1967, and the museum didn't give an exact cause of death, but it said that it was only upon his death that the numerous self-inflicted scars were discovered. It's tragic that this guy also resorted to self-harm to ease the pain as I did. And that connects me to this stranger across time. It makes me feel less ashamed about those self-harm impulses. It's not weakness. It's a normal human instinct under extreme circumstances. But maybe they're right. This pain is just psychological. That doesn't make it any less real or legitimate or debilitating. It just means I need to get creative about my treatment. I've read a few books by Navy SEALs, David Goggins being the most famous, second being Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor. I find the SEALs' mindset to be very inspiring, and my journey through Japan was proving a lot of what they talked about. We can endure so much more than we think we're capable of. We in this modern world are all soft. We shy away from even mild discomfort. We live in air-conditioned environments. We have food constantly at the ready in our fridges. We wear shoes and sleep in beds so soft that they weaken and harm our bodies. I was always of the mindset to become as strong as possible, living as our ancestors did, living like a human being. You know, I love bodybuilding, I have cold showers, even in a Japanese winter, I will sit in my sauna, even in an Australian summer. Or I won't use air conditioning, either in the home or in my car. I either wear barefoot shoes or no shoes at all. I sleep on the ground on a dog bed. I sit on the ground when I'm working at home. But when it comes to the phantom pain, it was stopping me in my tracks. I was missing so much work. I was sleeping a lot. I was losing so much of my life to it. I would maybe exercise once or twice a week. And then I'd have a week here or there where I could go every single day, and then I'd crash again, and then I'd have to sort of build up that strength all over again. Yes, the pain might to a degree be psychological, but there's also the physical component of the nervous system, the nociceptors, as I mentioned. The ventral vagal system, all of that. I firmly believe there are physical symptoms that could be detected. We just don't have the technology yet. There's something wrong with my nervous system. But as I said at the top of this video, I was being conditioned to feel powerless. I can overcome this pain. I realize now that doctors and therapists mean well, but what they end up doing, unintentionally perhaps, is creating patients who feel disempowered and end up catastrophizing and falling into histrionics. I saw this a lot in the chronic illness communities, which is why I wanted nothing to do with them. They would just complain endlessly about every little problem and act like it was the end of the world. And when you try to suggest to them that exercise or diet or some lifestyle changes might improve their symptoms, they get offended. They dogpile on you. And that's because most people are afraid to be uncomfortable. But to survive, you gotta get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to face the truth. You have to become accountable for your own life. People are always looking to blame their problems on someone else. They complain for the sake of it. Whereas I understand my mental and physical conditions, while they're not my fault, they're my responsibility. And I've seen so many people, including friends and family members, fall into that self-pitying trap. Their lives are falling apart but they don't do anything to save themselves. The painful truth is no one is coming to save them. No one's coming to save any of us. We have to save ourselves. Other people can put a band-aid on temporarily, but it's not permanent. You got to do that. After the incident, I had a lot of healing to do. I did need lots of rest. I had a severe traumatic brain injury. That's not a mind over matter thing. But now I'm fully healed. There's no reason for me to still behave as if I'm injured. So why am I still suffering 2.5 years later? It's because trauma is a shock to the nervous system. It becomes hypervigilant. At the slightest hint of danger, the pain and fatigue flares up. The body and brain are connected. Trauma and depression share a lot in common with the symptoms of the cold or flu. Low energy, low mood, sleeping a lot, withdrawing from society, a general achiness. It's the body's way of protecting itself. That's why I'm saying, even if it's psychological, it's still real. It still has a bearing on the physical body. And I call this the internal alarm system. After a trauma, the alarm goes off far too often and at inappropriate times. My trip to Japan made me realize this, and it presented me with the opportunity to reset that alarm. After my years in therapy and reading books like Why Does It Still Hurt and The Body Keeps a Score, as well as books and articles on the polyvagal theory, I felt fully educated on the latest scientific understanding of pain. And Japan was my way of putting that theory to the test. Thankfully, it proved my theory true. On our tour, we rarely stopped moving. Day after day, we were constantly walking, hunting for food, hours-long train rides. We had to be packed up and ready to check out on time. No excuses, no matter how you felt. So I might not be able to experience basic training, but this tour was my boot camp. It taught me to ignore my alarm and to not panic when it starts ringing. And yes, I could speak more about all the other things we got up to in Japan. I went to the Death Stranding exhibit, we went to karaoke, we went to see many other shrines and temples and museums and more shops. But honestly, the most important thing I got out of this trip was what it did for my pain and PTSD. Although I will mention I was called Sir most of the time on that trip for some reason, even on the plane. I think I'm a good-looking woman, but by Japanese standards I must be a little too big and bulky, and my voice is a little too deep to be read as female. At least in their eyes. But I was dressed simply in either one of two jumpsuits. I wore a little makeup, I had my curly hair, I had my cute little bandana, but no. Still, they looked at me and saw a man. Okay. I can't say I'm surprised, because the men over there can be very androgynous and feminine. It was like traveling to a magical land where everyone was catering to my autoandrophilia. And so I was only traveling with a backpack. I am a minimalist, so for me the fun was seeing how little I could bring and survive. Most of the group was lugging around a suitcase and a backpack, and I was glad I was traveling light. It's called backpacking for a reason. I brought back only one bag of souvenirs, and, they were very specifically chosen. I didn't impulse buy them. I would see them, maybe come back the next day and grab them. In future, though, I realized I can travel with even less stuff than I brought. I didn't end up writing or reading much on the plane. That was the stuff I ended up bringing that was just taking up space. Because I was so nauseous on the plane. So most of the time I was just meditating or sleeping, or I was listening to audiobooks. So the next trip I go on is Croatia next year in the summer to visit that friend. And so yeah, I might just stick to audiobooks. And plus, it will be summertime, so I have far fewer clothes I'll need to bring. I gotta tell you, that puffer jacket and the puffer vest were annoying the hell out of me the entire time. Because I'm Australian. I'm not used to being smothered in that many layers. Most of the year I'm in a t-shirt and shorts. Like, right now is autumn, supposedly, but we've got some 40-degree days ahead of us, and I'm happy about that. I had a few days alone after the tour. It was nice to just slow down, eat proper meals in the hotel buffet. I did miss the group, though. They were a good bunch. On our final day, we were playing a graduation playlist. We got that Vitamin C song going. But when I was on my own, I took the time to go visit the Kojima Productions building. And then the next day I was supposed to go on this Mount Fuji tour, but my travel agent never gave me much information about it. And, I was already exhausted because I was fighting a cold at the time. And I was dreading an entire day of traveling ahead of me on the plane to get back home. So when I got the email the night before going to Mount Fuji and it said, it's a 2-hour drive, there's no public transport out there. The only way to get out there was by tour bus. And you're stuck out there all day. And they drive home in the evening. And I had no idea what access to food or water was going to be like. And I just thought, no fucking way. I'm staying here. I'm resting. I'm getting as many calories into my body as I can. Catching a cold didn't even really slow me down that much. I wasn't confined to my hotel bed. Well, I should say, my hotel beds were just the quilts and mattress toppers that I pulled off of the beds. Sometimes I would have to dump the mattress in the hallway. We're sleeping in these little bunks, so I couldn't put the mattress anywhere else. I can't get comfortable sleeping on these marshmallows. I need pressure at all times. I think everyone does. So even when I was sick, I could push through it. My nose was running like a bastard, but otherwise I felt fine. I wore my samurai face mask, the Bogan Shogun mask, if you will. Got a few looks and comments, but most people thought it was pretty cool. Because, yeah, of course it's cool. The flight home was exhausting. It was an entire day. I got up at about 4 a.m., would be at 3 a.m. Perth time, and, got on the train, then connected to another train, then got to the airport, then the entire process. Again, Japan, Hong Kong, Perth. That's an entire day. I did not go to sleep. So I got up at 4 a.m., didn't go to bed until midnight. It was hard. It was exhausting, but I survived. It wasn't that bad. And in fact, the flight home was a little easier than the flight there. My mechanic mate picked me up. He'd been babysitting Ivy the whole time, fixing her radiator, replacing her brake discs. He drove me to his house, and then, which, just gave me a little bit of time to get my bearings and some fresh air into me, get my land legs back. And then I drove the rest of the way home, top down, of course. And then I got home, and I just needed some time to wind down, drink some ginger tea. Rehydrate myself was primarily the goal there. I think I had a shower as well, and then I went to bed at midnight. My biggest realization, as I've said throughout this entire video, is that we are all holding ourselves back. We're too soft. I walk through life now getting frustrated at all the soft people around me. They're perfectly able-bodied. They just take it for granted. They don't treat their bodies well. They could be so much more than they are now, but they're addicted to comfort. And there's a scientific reason for this. The body fights very hard to maintain homeostasis and equilibrium. But being uncomfortable isn't as dangerous as this instinct, this alarm system leads us to believe. Hormesis, the exposure to adverse conditions, is crucial for health and strength and even longevity. Hot conditions, cold conditions, fasting, exercise. We're human beings, we're animals, we're living creatures, we're made to move. And you look at hunter-gatherers, you look at our ancestors, and we didn't have conveniences readily at hand, and that's what we evolved to exist in. We exist to fight, to survive through adversity. We're not meant to live in these perfectly air-conditioned environments and never stress ourselves, never strain ourselves. And since coming home, life's gotten a lot easier, and to further this alarm deactivation, I sit completely still in my sauna and meditate, and not moving a muscle. My body does everything in its power, begging and pleading for me to move, to scratch, to quit. I just ignore it, and I'm completely fine. I didn't even look at the timer, so I have no idea when the experience will end, and I'm training myself to relax with that. I know I can sit there for 30 minutes. I know I'm in no danger. And so the more I do this, the easier it gets. As I mentioned before, the professionals around me were telling me to slow down, to rest, to go easy on myself. But now I know, and hopefully I've shown you, the solution is just the opposite. I had to push myself harder. I had to get my head out of my ass and stop feeling sorry for myself. The pain may never go away, but now I know it's a lie. I keep pushing myself and I'm fine. I've been able to attend work much more than I used to. I only missed one day due to my period, and that's the only thing that really slows me down anymore, so yeah, I do need to make another update on the menstrual situation. And I've been going to the gym 3 times a week so far. I honestly feel like I could push myself even harder than this, but I'm hesitant to shake things up just yet. I want to see how long I can sustain this effort. You know, my work and gym attendance have been practically perfect, but I've only been back in Australia for a little over a month. You know, I don't want to start loading more stuff on top and then feel like a failure because I'm doing too much and asking too much of myself. I had no idea how much travel would change my life. I didn't realize how much I needed it. And it's helped me far more than any therapy ever has. And I'm thinking there are a lot of people out there like me who can improve as well by just pushing harder and ignoring that inner alarm. You know, and I'm really excited to get out there, to travel more. There's so many more possibilities ahead of me where I used to think there was nothing. I may never feel 100% ever again. I accept that. It may always take me effort to get out of bed, to go to work, but I know I can do it. And it doesn't bother me. In fact, I feel like my baptism of pain makes me stronger, makes me more unique, makes me appreciate what I have. If I have to work harder than everyone else, so be it. That gives me an edge. So basically, long story short, I've become the white female David Goggins. Stay hard. He knows that sounds like a reference to erections, right? Anyway, see you, Space Cowboy. And I hope the next video won't be so far delayed. Maybe I'll get more videos out now because I'm not struggling with fatigue and depression and pain. And I don't know if you could tell, I'm using a teleprompter app. This is the first time I've actually, it's not a sponsor, but I know I figured out you can put a teleprompter app over the video feature in a phone. So I realized if I just write my script all the way out beginning to end, it might make the process a lot easier instead of just trying to riff and do everything from the top of my head and doing multiple takes. So let me know how you thought about this one and see you around. See you, Space Cowboy.